Star Wars 7x7 episode 2199. Fan service is a huge topic of conversation in Connections, which is the final episode of the Disney Gallery series about The Mandalorian. Punch it. Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So, Connections, the final episode in the Disney Gallery series about The Mandalorian. I believe it's the longest episode of this situation as well, and it is filled with footage from other Star Wars stories. And there's a reason why that's the case, because it is spending a lot of time showing you how there were elements, visuals, and creatures, and saying creatures, but other species, on all of these other things and situations that were depicted in other Star Wars stories that ultimately inspired situations and events and characters and so on and so forth that occur in The Mandalorian. Now, they talk about this stuff in terms of fan service, and we're going to hear from Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni about the concept of fan service and about putting things in from other media sources momentarily. I do want to say that the way they talk about fan service is, I would say, pretty inclusive in the sense that, it's something where if you are steeped in a particular aspect of things, then it will give you a zing if you see it in The Mandalorian. But they're by no means suggesting that there's somebody who's any less of a fan if they're not familiar with some of the things. It's just meant to be like, hey, if you happen to remember that, if it happened to fire your imagination, then you might be tickled to find it in The Mandalorian or find some reference to it. Personally, there was something for me that I was not familiar with and was kind of like shocked to discover. The blurgs, those sort of smashed up patrol dewback creatures, they actually have appeared in other Star Wars stories. They go all the way back to Ewoks: The Battle for Endor. Oh my gosh, one of the TV movies from back in the day, right? And apparently they've also appeared in Clone Wars and Rebels, and Dave Filoni joked about how he can't seem to get away from blurgs because every show on which he's worked has had blurgs in them, which I thought was particularly amusing. And there's also an extended discussion about Willrow Hood, who is the guy evacuating Cloud City in The Empire Strikes Back, who's carrying the Hamilton Beach ice cream maker, right? And how they made an action figure of him, and they use that ice cream maker as the inspiration for the Camtono that has the Beskar in it. It's basically a safe for all intents and purposes, but they even talked about Star Wars Celebration and how there's a running of the Willrow Hoods where a bunch of these people dress up in orange jumpsuits and carry around their ice cream makers and stage a run through the convention halls. And I've had the distinct pleasure of seeing that happen a couple of times, and it is wicked fun. And there's even a moment in this episode where they're talking about the Mandalorian's pulse phase rifle, and how it originated in the holiday special, and Jon Favreau talking about trying to talk to George Lucas while he was on set and saying, hey, remember this? This is from your holiday special. And George Lucas just utterly disavowing anything to do with the holiday special in just a couple of short words. Nope, wasn't me. And that's that. But here's what I want to share with you about the fan service side of the conversation. First, here is Jon Favreau.
We're doing fan service creatively, what would this be cool?
For those who know, they'll appreciate it. Those who don't, it just looks like cool Star Wars stuff.
Now in walks this, or here's a vehicle, we should make it the Kenner troop transport with a 6 stormtroopers stand on the side. That wasn't based on anything in the movies. Let's put it in. Somebody's got to torch the bar. Let's use the incinerated stormtrooper. Could we do that? We don't have one. Paint it like this. Next thing you know, we're painting it. It's in there. And then who you cast also. People who are either fans of Star Wars or people who have a body of work from other things that when they come into the Star Wars world, the fans are like, that's cool.
So let's just do this job. We get in, we get out, and you don't have to see our faces anymore.
Because we're not George Lucas, because we're also, we're just filmmakers who grew up watching it, just because we say it doesn't mean it's cool. We've got to, we're definitely thinking about how's this going to play with the fans.
So there you go, Jon Favreau talking about inserting all of these elements from other stories into The Mandalorian. And now Dave Filoni talking about fan service and about how to do it the right way.
It has to work on a story level and a character level.
Tiny.
And then the fan gets the little, bit of gold in there, and then people, what is that? Why are you excited? Oh, that's because it's this droid that was an Empire Strikes Back that never did anything. It just stood there and looked menacing, but I had the action figure of it. And you're like, what? Didn't do anything? No, didn't do anything, but it did something in my mind. And there's many layers of that. But to me, it's just using the universe that was created. It's not taking it in a different direction. It's not just throwing a term in there for the sake of winking, saying, see, I get it. That's something that takes practice.
All right, there you go. Dave Filoni talking about fan service and about how to do it right. And I think that builds on the conversation, or serves as a nice epilogue, if you will, to the conversation that we've been having this past week about Dave Filoni and about his development within Lucasfilm and his storytelling potential and how Star Wars stories are going to be told in the future. And I think this is a really good thing. He seems to be the right guy in the right place at the right time, and it's going to be very interesting to see how other Star Wars stories develop around him, particularly the Kenobi series and the Cassian Andor series, which is the next two that are on deck for us. And we'll be talking about that more in future episodes of the show as well, but that is going to do it for this episode and our look at Connections, which is the final episode in the Disney Gallery series for The Mandalorian. There's a lot of fun talk from this episode, and I honestly, I really enjoyed this one a lot, and I'm not sure which one ultimately out of all these episodes I think is my favorite. I really enjoyed score, I really enjoyed practical, but honestly, even if you're not a behind-the-scenes fan, I do think that this is a really fascinating look at The Mandalorian. And if you are a Mandalorian fan and you just cannot wait until Season 2 comes out in October, then I think it's worth your time. That's going to do it. All right, thank you so much for joining me. As always, keep wearing your masks, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
Is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2020 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.